countdown is on, but you're not alone. This is Countdown to College, your weekly guide from Education Quest Foundation, here to help you plan, apply, and pay for college one step at a time. I'm your host, Gage, and today I am joined by Jasmine Brown, a college planning specialist here at Education Quest. Hi, Jasmine. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Hey,
So, Jasmine and I are here today to help you find a college you can swipe right on. And in other words, we're going to break down, how to kind of find your perfect fit, find the perfect school for you. So, Jasmine, I don't know, let's just start at the very beginning of the whole process. Like when a student starts looking for colleges, what's just the smartest first step? Because I feel like there's so many directions you can go.
for sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that a good first step when trying to make a decision on what college to go to is just kind of considering which colleges have your field of study. I think that, there's colleges all over the country that have lots of different things and offer, lots of different fields of study. So I think that it can be kind of hard to narrow it down from there, but I just think that that is a good place to start. And then kind of after that, students can kind of choose, okay, this is what I'm looking at. These schools have what I'm looking for, and then from there you can kind of narrow down based on a couple of other criteria. So yeah, I think that that's just a good first place to start.
Yeah, I remember I wanted to go to acting school, which thankfully, I mean, here in the Midwest, there's not a whole lot of acting schools. That kind of helped to narrow my choices. But like you said, I think it's a really good first smart step, especially if you want to go into something specialized. It can really help you narrow it down.
Absolutely. And yeah, like good point too there. It's like after looking at that, schools that have your field of study, you can start looking at location and then you can start considering cost, size of school and things like that. So yeah, I think that is a great first place to start.
And we'll dig into all of that, trust. But are there any for seniors right now? This is the really the important, time of their life right now is picking this college during their senior year. What key tasks should they be like prioritizing right now as they move through their college search process? We'll be in the winter and like spring semester before we know it. So,
Yeah, great question. I think seniors should just prioritize applying to their colleges of interest. I know sometimes applying now, there could be certain perks that you get or, tuition or application fee waivers that can happen if they start applying now. But it's a good idea for students to narrow down their searches and their choices to about three. So I always say your dream school, plan B, and plan C. So applying to those plan B and C schools can be, schools that they know that they'll get accepted to and just kind of those safer options. But students should also just kind of prioritize going on campus visits during this time and speaking with college reps at their school's college fair. If the college fair has already happened, I know a lot of times the schools will reach out with other information. So that's kind of a good task to really start reaching out to those reps, ask some questions if you have anything lingering that you didn't talk about, and then just kind of making those choices from there.
yeah, we'll talk about campus visits a little bit later in the episode because we'll talk about it, but they're so important because there's only so much you can really tell from photos and they're online. Every college has their website, that touts them as the perfect college for you. So it's kind of up to you to weave through all that. But I mean, speaking of that, are there any like specific strategies or tools or anything that can kind of help a student narrow down their list of colleges?
Yeah, that is a great question too. Students can use, so Education Quest on our website, we've got plenty of tools to kind of help students narrow down those searches. So we've got College Profiles resource. So that resources does a really good job of kind of comparing and contrasting the different colleges. So students can go in and kind of filter for a different or a couple of different criteria. So like school size, state in particular activities, whatever else majors. And then from there, it can kind of pull those different schools. So let's say a student is going into psychology and they want to look into schools that just have psychology programs. They can filter for that, and then that can pull all of those colleges. And then from there, they can then, okay, I don't want to go out of state. And then they can kind of take out the states that they don't want to go to, or if they want to stay in Nebraska, they can filter for just that. And then that can kind of help narrow that down as well. I would say outside of that too, just kind of narrowing down like if they are thinking about going out of state, thinking about, okay, do I like warm weather? Do I like cool weather? That can kind of help narrow down from that list from that college profiles resource there. So I think that's a good place for kind of comparing and contrasting.
I say it every episode. Shameless plug for our resources though, because they are, I mean, they're free, number one, but also they are really useful. Like I did use college profiles when I was looking for colleges, just because it is nice to see a comparison. I feel like I have really bad like object permanence sometimes, where like as soon as I'm done
Yeah.
looking at a college's info, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll remember that.
Yeah.
Doesn't stick in my head at all. Like it's just nice to see it side to side. So
Yeah, absolutely. And plenty of times too, when I'm working with a student, in a college planning appointment, we'll kind of go through that if they're not really sure on what college to go to. So that's kind of where a good point of start, just to kind of go through that information. Like you said, get that side by side comparison too. So
going into some of the things that, students should be considering, comparing when picking a college, how can students balance, things like cost and distance, kind of more practical with personal preferences like campus vibe or like you said, weather?
yeah, definitely. I always recommend to students to make a pro and cons list. I think that's the easiest, quickest way to compare everything that they're thinking. So whether that be like cost, whether whatever else, campus vibe, if they felt good on campus, they didn't, they can kind of start going from there. So that pro and cons list can really help the student ask themselves, what do I like and dislike about a college? Whether if they've gone on a campus visit or not, if maybe they've seen pictures or if there's something that they were liking, but then there's other things that they didn't like, that can kind of help lay that out a little bit better. So, I think from there that can ultimately help the student decide what the best choice is, on the surface. And then, kind of figuring that out. How you feel on campus is just as important as the financial piece. So it's important to kind of consider both of those things, when making that official decision.
Yeah, we just had an episode too about kind of comparing financial aid offers and what a big role that plays into kind of your perfect fit too. Because there could be, a good school, but you're going to get more aid at another school.
Sure.
There's just a lot to consider. Like I said, this
Yeah.
is it's an overwhelming process, which is why we're giving some tips out right now because we
Yeah.
know, I mean, most of all of us here went to college, so we know how scary it was going through it the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we talked about, that campus vibe, right? Which is kind of vague terms, but it's really just how you feel about like, the campus you're on, the people, the atmosphere. And so what role like does a campus visit kind of play in figuring out if a college is the right match? Because that's when you can kind of really get your feet on the ground and take everything in. What should like students be
Absolutely.
looking for like beyond the official tour?
Yeah, I think campus visits are a huge part of helping decide what college you want to go to. I've heard stories of students who have, had a school in mind for years and they've considered this, saw it, on a wherever, got the idea that they wanted to go there. But once they get on campus, something just didn't feel right. So maybe they decide to go somewhere else. And that's totally okay. That's the whole point of getting on campus. Getting on the campus helps you imagine, what life is going to look like for you going there. Can you see yourself studying in the library on campus? Can you see yourself walking to class, living in the dorms? Do you feel comforted by being on that campus? And I think that's a huge part of going to college. I think that's why students do choose to go and stay on campus and get involved in school and doing different things around the school. So I just think that, campus visits are super, super important if you can get to them and do them. Definitely recommend for students to do that.
I should mention a lot, I don't know about most, but a lot of campus visits, you'll get a free meal at the whatever dining hall they have, and that was always the best part to me. And so even if you don't like the campus, you could always get a little bit of food on the side.
Yeah.
And so we talked about, in the very first question I asked you, you said that, finding somewhere that offers the programs and the training that a student wants for their specialized program. And so how can students be sure that a college offers, the specific academic programs they want? And what should they be looking for beyond just the major things like internships, research opportunities, any support services, stuff like that?
Yeah. So students can make sure that the colleges offer their desired program of study by typically looking on the school's website. I know a lot of times it's typically under like an academics tab or something like that. But that'll basically list out all of the undergraduate programs of study that they have. So with that, then the student can kind of say, look into, all of those different categories and see if what they're wanting to do falls under that. And it's just possible that some schools just don't offer maybe what you specifically want to go into. And if that's the case, maybe it's just not a good fit for you. So I think just looking into that, this could also be something that a student asks on a campus visit or goes specifically to tour for that specific program. So there could be a potential, I know, for example, if they're going to like an engineering program, there could be like an engineering program tour that they could participate in with either their parents or by themselves. And that could kind of help answer some of those questions for them. So um, they can also, to speak to the other part of your question, on-campus visits, students can also ask about different resources that are available on campus. So career or support services, they may have information about where you can start to go to look for internships, and maybe they have like a career hub on campus or something like that, that provides some of that searching for some of that post graduation.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask you if it's kind of possible to meet with like faculty or professors from those programs so you can learn more about that. Is that something that's like common to ask for?
Yeah, I don't know about specific meeting with professors specifically, but you may be able to meet with some like advisor or maybe a student that is in the program already, or maybe your tour guide already is in that program and they can offer some insight in that as well. So it just kind of depends on what resources they have for during those campus visits. But I know for sure that you can set up a visit with the specific college within your school. So that you can kind of get a deeper inside look into that specific area.
Great. Moving now, talking more financial, which is a big part of college. A growing part of, the college concern is budget. So
Yes.
how early should families really start discussing budget, and how can students use financial aid offers like we talked about to kind of compare affordability between schools?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say as early as you can. Talking about finances can be a little bit of a touchy subject, so I feel like families maybe don't feel as comfortable talking about that. But I think, getting it out in the open as early as possible is really helpful so that you can prepare for what that's going to look like. So, being prepared for just talking about how to afford to go to college, that's going to be a lot on the students' shoulders to try to figure out all within their senior year. So, as early as families can, I think that's probably the best way to go about it. Also, the earlier the family discusses the financial piece of it, the earlier they can begin to start talking about the FAFSA process, and basically just kind of preparing for getting their materials together for the FAFSA, creating those accounts, and doing different things leading up to that FAFSA. And then, of course, the financial aid offers will come to the students after they have filed the FAFSA and selected their schools to send the information to. So this financial aid offer will detail out everything that the student can receive for financial aid. So that will include scholarships, grants, work study, and student loans. So then at the end of the day, they can kind of compare each offer and look through those line items to see, okay, let's say I'm getting more scholarships at one school compared to the other, or I've got some type of tuition assistance program at this school, but this out-of-state school, maybe I'm paying a different tuition rate. And then they can kind of see, what's going to be the best deal at the end of the day. Those financial aid offers will, say that whole financial aid package there too. So you'll be able to see exactly what you could receive and kind of, what's the better deal.
Make sure you do the FAFSA. It just opened
Yes.
recently in October. It's FAFSA season here.
Yes.
And I mean, like you talked about, like it is number one, that some financial aid is first come, first served. So you want to make sure you get that in. But also number two, like you said, it's just easier if you are able to get those financial aid offers early. You can actually take some time to really look through them and compare them. So that's another, I don't know, I always bring up like, please do the FAFSA early, but that's another point to my case.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely do the FAFSA early. And I think too, schools understand that students are applying to multiple places. So you do have to give yourself time to be able to actually look through that information with your family and talk about that financial piece because that's huge. So yeah.
What factors should students think about when deciding how close or far from home a college should be? That's a big thing for some students, especially if you get homesick easily, or I don't know, maybe you want to get away. Like,
Yeah, definitely. So I think students should just consider cost, of course, when deciding how far or close to home they should go. Schools that are out of state typically are going to have charge an out-of-state tuition, which will be higher than in-state tuition. So this will be just something to consider. Again, that's why it's important to talk about that financial piece there too, so that you can really think about is going closer or farther a better choice. So once you receive your financial aid offer after filling out that FAFSA, again, you'll have a chance to compare and contrast at each school. So maybe those FAR schools, you could see, what that's going to look like for comparing that. They should also consider if being far from their family and friends in their hometown is going to make an impact on their college experience or not. Or if they're wanting a fresh start in a new place. So, I mean, let's be honest, most students are going to feel homesick to some degree. I went to school in my hometown and I still felt homesick. I lived in the dorms and I was still going home every weekend, going to, back to my parents' house. But, some students may be able to kind of deal with that a little bit better. But, maybe consider if the school that you're wanting to go to is within 2 or 3 hours drive from your house, from your hometown. That may be a little bit easier for students kind of that in that adjustment period as opposed to maybe having to get on a plane to go home, or you're living thousands and thousands of miles away. That could just make battling that homesickness a little bit easier. So, I know my friend lived, 2 to 3 hours away from her hometown, but could still go home and get those home cooked meals. When she
mhm.
was feeling homesick, she could just get in her car and be home in 2 to 3 hours. So I think that's also a big thing to consider when making those college choices.
When it comes like when it comes to location, I mean, you want to think about home too, but how does like going somewhere that's more urban or more rural, a large university or a small college kind of shape like the overall student experience?
Yeah, I think location can have a pretty large impact on student experience. If a student wants to be in smaller classes, maybe they choose a medium to small school in a more rural area. If they're wanting the big campus feel, large auditorium classes may be appealing to them. They may choose to do a large school in a bigger city. So it really is just going to depend on what kind of experience that student wants to have. Because with each different type of school, obviously there are pros and cons. I would say too, with specific programs that students are going into, if they're going into maybe like a farming or more rural based program, it may be better to go to a more rural college. So it really just kind of depends too on opportunities within that community post graduation as well.
All right, Jasmine, I have one final question for you. What is just the best way for students to kind of get a feel for a college's social climate and determine if it's a good fit?
Yeah, great question. So, I think the best way for a student to get a feel for a college's social climate is to really kind of start looking into what activities there are on campus. I think that's a really great way for students to get involved and to kind of feel some sense of community. It's really important, just as important as it is for academics, for cost, for the student to feel safe and comfortable on campus. So I think that that is a really great way to kind of start getting connected and feeling out, if the student can feel comfortable. Maybe again, going back to the campus visits, this could be something that the student could ask on a campus visit. So maybe they're asking about clubs on campus, or if there isn't a club or they don't hear of a club that they are interested in, maybe they start a new one. So that could kind of give that sense of connectedness on campus. But also the tour guide, if you do ask that question on a campus visit, maybe they can give recommendations for things, the other things outside of clubs on campus or in the community that kind of help students feel a little bit more connected on campus.
Great. Okay, I think that wraps us up. Thank you, Jasmine, for hopping on and sharing your expertise.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much.
And to our audience, if you ever need help with anything college related, you can contact an Education Quest office near you for free help. Jasmine and all of our other college planning specialists would be more than happy to help you with. I mean, it's FAFSA season right now, obviously, but they do just like basic college planning things. If you want to come talk about, your college list or something like that, like please feel free. We're happy. We're here. It's free. You can find our contact information or schedule an appointment on educationquest.org. And while you are there, also make sure to sign up for the weekly Countdown to College email that's filled with college tips and tricks. We send out reminders about the FAFSA, college deadlines coming up, scholarship deadlines, all that good stuff. And again, the sign up for that is at the bottom of educationquest.org. Finally, help us get this message out to as many students and families as possible by subscribing to this podcast on your favorite platform and hitting the like button on this episode. Thank you for watching and listening, and we will see you next week.